What if I told you? A man once held his toddler son in one hand and clutched a broken bone density scanner in the other, while sleeping in a public restroom of a train station. Not for one night, not for a weekend, but for months. This isn't fiction. This isn't a movie. This is the real story of Chris Gardner, a man who had nothing, no home, no food, no money, but still refused to give up. By the end of this video, you'll understand why never quitting is the most powerful decision you can ever make. This is the kind of story that can change your perspective, and maybe even your life. Chris Gardner wasn't born into wealth or privilege. He was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1954 to a poor family. Abuse, alcoholism, abandonment. These weren't rare events in his childhood. They were constants. His stepfather beat his mother. He beat Chris too. Chris spent time in foster homes, watched his mother go to jail, and grew up surrounded by violence and fear. But even as a child, Chris knew one thing. I don't want this to be my life. I want more. He joined the Navy, trying to break the cycle. He worked as a medical equipment salesman afterward, trying to support his girlfriend and newborn son. But that job barely paid. And the scanner he sold? It was expensive, outdated, and no one wanted it. Day by day, his money dried up. His relationship fell apart. And in the blink of an eye, Chris found himself homeless, with a baby in his arms. One day, Chris saw a man in a red Ferrari in San Francisco. He asked, "What do you do?" And "How do you do it?" The man smiled and replied, "I'm a stockbroker." That one answer lit a fire in Chris. He didn't know stocks. He didn't have a degree. He didn't even have a place to stay. But he had hunger. The kind of hunger that made him walk into brokerage firms every day with the same question, "Will you give me a chance?" After months of rejection, he got one. Dean Witter Reynolds accepted him as an intern. Here's the twist. The internship was unpaid. And yet, Chris said yes. He worked from 9 to 5, learning, hustling, making calls. Then, from 5 to midnight, he searched for food, shelter, and safety for his son. Sometimes they'd sleep in public parks, sometimes in shelters, and sometimes in the locked bathroom of a train station. Imagine holding your crying child, pressing your back against the door, hoping no one forces it open. That was Chris Gardner's life. Chris wasn't the smartest in the room. He wasn't the most connected, but he was the most determined. During his internship, he studied harder, stayed later, and smiled more than anyone else. He was competing for one full-time position. Just one. And he was up against Ivy League graduates. Men in suits with degrees from Harvard and Stanford. He didn't even own a suit. But he had a dream, and he showed up every single day. He made 200 cold calls a day, sometimes skipping lunch, sometimes skipping sleep. One time, the IRS froze his bank account. He had less than $30 to survive. But he kept going. Why? Because one voice inside him kept whispering, "This is not how my story ends." After 6 months of unpaid work, hardship, and hunger, the day finally came. The hiring manager looked at Chris and said, "We'd like to offer you the job." Chris Gardner shook his hand, walked out the office, and broke down in tears. He didn't cry because he had a job. He cried because he had survived. He wasn't homeless anymore. He was a stockbroker. And for the first time, he could look into his son's eyes and say, "We're going to be okay." But that's not where the story ends. Chris didn't stop at okay. He rose through the ranks. He learned. He grew. And in 1987, he opened his own brokerage firm, Gardner Rich and Company, with just $10,000 and a single piece of furniture, his desk. He worked 12 hours a day, every day, and slowly his dream took shape. Years later, he sold his stake in the firm for millions. Chris Gardner went from a man sleeping in toilets to becoming a multi-millionaire and motivational speaker. He even met President Obama. and his autobiography became a Hollywood film, The Pursuit of Happyness, starring Will Smith. But Chris says the best moment of his life was not the money, not the fame. It was the day he saw his son grow up free from the pain he endured. Chris Gardner's story isn't about luck, it's about decisions. He decided to try, to fight, to believe. When everyone else would have given up, he kept moving. And in his words, "You can only depend on yourself. The cavalry ain't coming." So if you're struggling right now, broke, tired, lost, remember Chris, because success doesn't begin with money, it begins with mindset. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that no matter how hard life gets, you can rise, then do 3 things. 1. Like this video, so the algorithm helps more people hear this story. 2. Subscribe to this channel, because we bring you real stories that truly inspire. 3. Comment below. Tell us, what's your dream? And are you ready to fight for it? Because if Chris Gardner can do it, so can you. This was The Pursuit of Happyness, the real story. Thanks for watching, and always remember, your pain today can be your power tomorrow.